Go ahead.
All right, good evening, everyone. As it is 7 o'clock, I would like to call to order the meeting of the Planning Advisory Committee for the Town of St. Andrews. February 19th edition. We're here at the WC O'Neill Arena Complex in the Council Chambers. Looking around, recording attendance, all PAC members are here. Dwight is actually online. Welcome. And we will mark everyone present. Mr. Goldman is here, Mr. Knopper is here for support as well. So thanks and welcome everyone. We have an agenda in front of us. If someone wants to make a motion on that agenda. I'll move to accept the agenda. Thank you, Councillor Harland, and seconded by Mr. Tanner. Thanks so much. We've actually had a request to move the terms and conditions application under item number 3 up ahead of the zoning application that we're going to hear tonight as well. So if that is amenable to everyone, if I can get it amended and seconded. I'll make that amendment. Thank you very much. Mr. Tanner, are you in support of that? Wonderful. Excellent. All right. So if there's no further discussion, all those in favor of approving the agenda with the amendment as discussed, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All hands up.
Aye.
Thank you, Dwight. Thank you very much. All right. And as we get started, we recognize that we are on the unceded traditional territory of the Peskotomuhkati people, and we welcome you to our meeting. Looking for any declarations of conflict of interest if any exist tonight. None. Thank you very much. We'll move forward. We all have the minutes from the January 22nd meeting, 2025 meeting in front of us, and I would entertain a motion on the adoption of those minutes. Kevin, thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Mr. Kerr. If there is no further discussion or questions, I will call the question. All those in favor of approving the minutes of January 22nd, please signify by saying aye.
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 Wonderful. Thank you very much. All right. So we will move forward with our variance application first. That is our reference number PAC 250214. This is a terms and conditions and the variance application for PID 013181112. That's 9 Water Street in Riley. The applicant requires terms and conditions to erect this 5'2" fence within the front yard and vary the minimum distance from the front property line, varying the minimum distance from the side property line. So to review this file, I'll turn it over to Mr. Bird.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One moment, I'll share my screen. Okay, as you said, this is the terms and conditions file. So for the fence in the front yard and for requesting a variance on the property lines. So PAC did see this file in December of 2024. And at that time, the application was for the fence in the front yard with the variance on the front yard. And since then, there has been information that the side yard fence does encroach within the setback. So still within the property of 9 Water Street, but does encroach on that setback. So the property is zoned service residential and it's inside the town plat. And the application is to obtain approval for an erected 5.2 foot woven wire fence, and that is within the front and side yard. So with woven wire fences, they remain strong in different environmental conditions and will protect the hedge from eaten by wild animals, and then does not, lose any visibility to the property. The fence is located 0.5 feet from the front property line and 1 foot from the side line. So section 3.213 does state that terms and conditions are required for fences that exceed 1 meter within the front yard. And there is an amendment to the zoning bylaw that is being reviewed for fences within the front yard. So fences within a residential zone can't exceed 6.6 feet, so it doesn't exceed the maximum height, and shall be located 1 meter from the property line. So the proposal requests variance to be located closer than the minimum distances. So the notification was sent to property owners within 100 meters. At the time of the report, there was no correspondence received by the adjacent property owner, but did receive that. And I know PAC has received some support for the application and one not in support. So this is a property here. You see in the yellow, it is service residential right on Water Street, and there is a single family dwelling on that property. This is the site plan that was submitted. So this is the revised site plan showing the fence on the sideline. And you'll see here that it shows where the stake is and where the property line, and the fence that is already erected on the sideline. So 1 foot from that shared property line. And the fence on the front here, it is set back only 0.5 feet from the front property line. So this is the rendering that was received in December with the application. And you can see from the site plan, or the site photos here, this is the fence on the sideline and the fence with the hedging in the interior side of that fence. So terms and conditions for this application, when we're looking at the conditions to be imposed, they are for the protection of properties within the zone or in budding zones, the health, safety, and welfare of the general public, and the integrity of the objectives of the policy established in the municipal development plan. So applications for permitted uses subject to terms and conditions may only be prohibited where the terms and conditions imposed can't reasonably be expected. And under section 55(1)(b) under the Community Planning Act does allow for reasonable or desirable variances. And so the general intent of the bylaw is to regulate fence height and placement, ensure that you don't have overly high fences in your front yard that could block a sight line to the road and within that sight triangle of an intersection. And the fence on the side property line is within the property boundary located 1 foot away from the shared property line. The fence is constructed with a low maintenance material. So when we're looking at setbacks for fences where this type of fence is low maintenance, it's not where we'd have a wood fence where 1 foot may not be sufficient for the upkeep. And the reduced setback does not hinder any development on the adjacent property. So it is in staff's opinion that the proposed fence is reasonable and desirable for the development of the land, subject to the recommended terms and conditions. And so staff recommends to the Planning Advisory Committee grant a variance to allow for a fence to be located at 0.5 feet from a front property line and 1 foot from the side property line of a property in the SR zone of the Town of St. Andrews zoning bylaw. And staff recommends to the Planning Advisory Committee permit a 5.2 foot high woven wire fence located within the front yard of a property in the SR zone of the Town of St. Andrews zoning bylaw, subject to the following terms and conditions. No fence in any residential or commercial zone shall be electrified or incorporate barbed wire or other sharp materials in its construction. And the fence shall be maintained so that it does not become unsightly, dilapidated, or unsafe. Thank you.
Does the committee have questions for the client?
I just have one question. I was trying to get my head wrapped around how this is one of the letters that were submitted said that this is a traffic issue when they park on their property. And I go by and I looked and I don't understand how this could be a traffic issue. Is that I guess, is that okay if she gets up?
Sure. As always, just identify yourself for the record and make sure your microphone is on.
Yes, that's Mary Kay, and my husband and I own the 28-foot property next to it. It's not the house with the which has the driveway there. Ours is just the 28 feet between the Riley house and the we call the driveway that's already there. So it's not that driveway.
Looking at the house, it's you're to the right or to the left?
I'm to the left,
Okay.
but just to the left.
Okay.
So, and the land slopes down. So when I park my car there, if I try and come up, because if they were back the full meter on the front, then I would have a meter to see, or if they were a meter over on the side, I could see around that telephone pole to the cars coming across in front of their house. With the fence as it is, my line of sight is restricted until I get out onto the road to see, because my driveway is right beside that piece. It's not over, it's not that parking lot that you see there. That's another property. So
So is it the telephone pole or the fence that's,
well,
Hasn't been
if
there
you add the
forever.
telephone pole to then blocking everything behind it, then, like before, I could see in front of the telephone pole to see out a car coming. And now I cannot.
is that due to
The hedge
fence
part.
or the?
No, it's the hedge,
Okay,
the hedge. And I don't know. Will the hedge be allowed to go to 5.2 feet, or is it restricted to 3 feet?
well, correct me if I'm wrong, but tonight we're only speaking about the fence.
We are.
So we're not speaking about the hedge?
We're so about, speaking about the fence, that's what the application involves. Is
So a hedge is not a fence then? So. Okay, I'm really confused now, because I looked up hedge and said it could be a fence. So. So if the hedge wasn't there, I could see probably through the fence, but because the hedge is there, I cannot. That's what safety issue.
Thanks.
Thank you for that. Any other questions?
So can we just get some clarification from Judy
Sure.
on the issue of the hedge? I mean, I know we're here to speak to the application for the fence, but I can understand this, the question and the confusion, given that the hedge is what is creating the site issue. We just got a clarification from Judy.
Sure, Madam Chair, I'm just pulling up the bylaw because the fence section 3.21, I just wanted to clarify about the hedges. So just one second.
Thanks.
So the bylaw does say a fence or a hedge may be planted. So the variance would be for the fence and the hedge.
Is there a way to tell how far the curve of the road be from the property line?
It would be hard to measure off GOMB. I could check to do. I know from the property line it's 0.5 feet, but from the site plan, I don't have the curve in the site plan to know what that measurement would be. Because we're looking at the property line, so I didn't measure from the curve in.
And Judy, to the question about how high the hedge can grow. What are the restrictions on the height of the hedge?
So when they're looking at the height, it says a fence. It doesn't give a height for a hedge, but you could reasonably assume that it means it could be the same height as the fence and not go any further. But then it could cause, some I suppose if it goes to 6.6 feet, I mean, but you're going to have to maintain that to ensure it doesn't go over the 6.6 feet. That is the minimum or the maximum height in the residential zone. And so it could definitely go to 6.6 feet, but then there would be the maintenance of ensuring that it doesn't go over that. The applicant may be able to speak better to how high that hedge is proposed, but it would not be able to go over the 6.6 feet.
A quick question.
Yes.
My understanding is the fence in the front yard by the bylaws 3.3 feet high, is it?
That's correct, without terms and conditions. So it is 1 meter within the front
Okay.
yard, but with terms and conditions can go up to 6.6 feet.
Okay, but the terms and conditions on this one would be 5.2 feet.
It would be for
At the
what they've
moment.
requested at 5.2, and it's already erected, so it's erected at 5.2.
Right.
But through the bylaw,
Okay.
they would be allowed to go to 6.6.
They would be allowed if we said that they would be allowed. We could
Exactly.
limit them.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
so if
thank
the
you.
application was for 6.6, they could, but this application is for 5.2.
Okay.
If a variance were granted for this, what's the town's responsibility to dispense or hedge for damage from snow removal?
Through you, Madam Chair, the town has no responsibility of it. It is the owner's responsibility to maintain hedges and fences anywhere within the land. So if snow removal were to hit it and knock it, it's the owner's responsibility. The town has no responsibility on maintaining anybody's hedges or fences.
Then, sorry, can I just ask one more question? Since I'm not in town and I'm right now in balmy 25-degree weather at 4:30 a.m. And I realize you guys have quite a bit of snow. Has anybody noticed any impact of the snow on the existing fence or hedge now?
No.
No?
Can I ask, Ms. Kay a question? Maybe at the, when we hear from. Or is it like?
Well, it's regarding, so I just want to understand the issue in terms of, the disruption in terms of sight coming out of your. And it's very helpful to understand that it's the hedge that you were talking about. And is it, I want to understand the height of the hedge that becomes problematic. Is it the current height? Or is it if the hedge grows to the terms and conditions, which is 5.2?
We already can't see by because it's a cedar hedge. So it is, and because the land slopes like this as we come up. If you have a high Jeep, you can probably see over it. But if you have a regular car, you can't see.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Can I ask you another question?
Yes, sir.
So if the fence was 3.3 feet, would that be an issue?
It's just.
Sorry, that's a hedge. Sorry, the cedar hedge was 3.3 feet. Would that be an issue?
It still blocks that line of sight.
Still be too much?
Yeah.
Okay. Can I ask one more question?
Anytime.
If we were to reject this, not approve this, would that be the removal of the fence and the hedge? Or how would that? What would be the next?
So the terms and conditions you cannot reject. Sorry, terms and conditions, there's not an acceptance or rejectance, there's just setting terms and conditions. And so they have the bylaw would allow them to do a fence up to 3.3 feet in the front yard without terms and conditions. It's going above 3.3 feet that requires the terms and conditions. Now, I think there's a variance for a side yard or the front yard as well. I'm not entirely familiar with the file. So the variances themselves could be rejected, and if they're rejected, then yeah, the remove that would basically mean that would have to be, it would have, I mean, it could be moved so it meets the bylaw, not necessarily removed, but moved to be a meter back and 3.3 feet.
3.3 feet high. Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I'm asking the planner to look up, we have it in the zoning bylaw sightline standards.
It's just the site triangle.
It's just a site triangle, but just
corners.
for the
Yeah,
corners,
okay.
just for reference, so PAC
Yeah.
understands. And no, Madam Chair, Mr. Riley is online and has his hand raised, so when you want to move to him, he's available. Yep.
Absolutely.
Construct the line of vision at a street intersection between the heights of 1 and 3 meters from the site triangle. So yeah, I mean, basically, it can't for a site triangle, which is for intersections. The height of anything, a building, structure, fence, sign, hedge, shrub, bush, or tree foliage, has to be lower than 3 meters. Now, theoretically, it could be above. 1 meter, 3 feet. It could be above 10 feet, but that's more like your tree foliage where it's not starting on the ground and going up, it's kind of hanging over. So 3 feet essentially for the site triangle.
But this is outside of the site triangle, is it not?
That would not apply. Now, yeah, I'll just leave it there.
Okay. I just gonna make one comment, well, probably a few more, but I think this is an issue only because the town is an older town. The property lines are quite tight to the buildings as well. I know my property line runs across my entrance steps at the front, and I think a corner of the house is actually on the property line. But that's an issue that has been inherited from an old town and the property lines that are existing. In a way, this is a situation where the house is a bit tight to the property line. There is some space. On one hand, I think a variance is appropriate for this condition because of the existing property line and how tight the house is to it. But also, I think once again, we're going down the road. We allow this. Does this mean everyone's going to start making a large fence right on their property line, or a taller fence at the property line? And it just goes down that typical road that we've seen before. So it's to me, on one hand, I understand the variance is kind of appropriate for this space, but also on the other hand, I think I don't want to see this happening. So it's for me, it's a little bit of a tricky situation.
Yeah, keeping in mind each file is looked at on its own merits. I understand your concern about setting a precedent, but we do look at each file. So that helps. Did anyone want to move on to the applicant at this point? We still have some questions for the planner.
Questions for
All right.
Judy. Can you show the picture of the front of the house again with the side fence, please?
You sure can. One moment. Oh, sorry. So this would give you a good view too of where the curb is in relation to where that fence is.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so where they state that the fence is kind of to keep the deer out. They do have a fence on the right-hand side of the driveway. So I don't really see an area where the deer would actually get in between the fence and the house. It's hard to say how far it goes down to the water, but. On the left, yeah. Okay, no. Thank you.
But just to clarify, we can't look at just, when we say the word fence, it's fence and hedge. It's not just fence. Correct? Ms. Hubbard?
It is both the fence and the hedge. I'd like the client to, or sorry, the applicant to confirm when that hedging was placed. It was placed before the fence was done or at the same time. I'm just wondering how existing that is.
The applicant is online. Applicant is waiting. We are recording it. And if it's posted to YouTube. Yep. It'll be online. Oh. They have to do it through their process.
I'm gonna move on to the applicant now, yeah. Then you can ask the question of, Mr. Riley.
Mr. Riley, can you hear us? If you can please unmute, you have the floor to PAC.
I can hear you. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yep, you're loud and clear.
Great. Just a quick note, and I'm sorry, I made the same note the last time. I appreciate everybody showing up, and Dwight, particularly you from remote places. Thank you. If you could say your name, it would be really helpful to know who's talking. It's really hard to tell who's talking, actually. And I know we talked about that last time. But I appreciate everybody coming together. I stuck my hand up actually because there were a couple of questions about maintenance of the fence and the hedge. And I am totally aware that we are responsible for maintaining the hedge in the event that we move forward. And there was a specific question about how is it faring during the winter. It has some snow piled up on it, but it seems fine. And as I said, we would take responsibility for that. The specifics question to Judy is the hedge, which Dwight had mentioned. The hedge actually went in at the same time as the fence, and it was our intention to keep the fence below the 6.5 feet. Below the 6.5 foot maximum. We wanted to keep it as low as possible. We wanted to have it in keeping with what we see on Water Street. The intent wasn't to have something different or new. It was really just to protect the house, protect the view, and to Mary and Brian Kay's point, is to really make sure that we are making sure that everybody is safe within the neighborhood as well. And so we actually were not aware of the concerns between Mary and Brian Kay. We have since received their information, and I know there was a connection with them today, which is great. We'd love to keep talking to them to figure out how to make them happy as well, if indeed that's possible. But just specifically on the fence, thank you, Judy, for pulling the file together twice now, and for recommending, obviously, that this seems like an appropriate variation on both sides, although I do understand the neighbor has concerns. But I'm here to answer any questions, and we want to be good neighbors and good townspeople as well. So if there are any specific questions, happy to take them.
Right, did you have some questions?
If there aren't, I did have one thing, which I also was, I'm not there, but I'm more than happy to come and make sure that as we think about the Ks, I noticed on the picture actually that Judy showed, there's something interesting actually on the picture. I don't know, Judy, if you're still listening, are you able to pull up that same, the same picture you just showed, showing the front and the side?
Madam
Because
Chair.
we didn't understand. We didn't understand the traffic concern either, but I do have a question actually just seeing that picture. And the gentleman at the beginning asked really who drove by the house was saying he didn't understand the traffic, and we didn't either. But I do have a question with everybody here.
Madam Chair, I can pull that up if you so choose.
Okay.
While this gets pulled up, I wasn't aware of so how we understood the use of that land that's next to us that the Ks are talking about was obviously it's a patch of land that runs down to the water. And one of the reasons we put both the fence and the hedge up is that we found people parking right in front of our front door and that side window, which is where our living room is. And so I particularly like the idea of blocking the house a little bit from the street. To Dwight's point, this house was built in the late 1800s, so the setback from there was no road when this was set up, so the setback is particularly tight to both the road and the side property. But as the Ks were explaining, I thought they were parking on the side, which is usually where I thought I had seen their car, but maybe I didn't have that correct, which is basically parallel parked on the road, which the hedge wouldn't have any impact to it. But if they're saying they use that, they talked about this as a driveway, which I didn't realize that's how they used this property, was as a driveway. But if you look at this picture here, you see where the curb is that rises. The curb for the driveway piece is actually probably what looks to be about 10 or 12 feet along. So the height of the hedge or the fence doesn't seem to have a huge impact. I'm happy to keep discussing it, but I guess I don't understand that.
Well, we'll
Or
have
maybe
a
I'm just not looking at that correctly.
yeah, we'll have a chance to get some clarification on that in just a moment.
Right.
Was
But
that-
I guess is everybody able to see from where the telephone pole is to where it looks like the curb of the driveway there?
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
probably 10 or 12 feet over. So we hadn't understood that that's how they were using that property. And obviously happy to keep talking to them. We want to be good neighbors, so.
I think so, because I don't know that we can necessarily resolve that here based on what is in the file that we're addressing tonight.
Yeah.
Makes it a little bit challenging, but. Did any committee members have any questions for the applicant?
So, Mr. Riley, I'm just going to put you on mute if the PAC needs to speak with you again, and we'll bring it back. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you. All right. Questions? We have questions from within the polling area, so this is your time. Come on up.
Well, I guess I'm confused. Are we just talking about terms and conditions right now, or are we also talking about the variance?
There are two variances being requested in this file, right? All right, one is for the distance of the front fence to the front property line, right? The other variance is for the side fence and its relation to the side property. So there are two variances based on placement against the property lines, and then there's terms and conditions on the front portion of the fence specifically. And fence equals hedge.
Yeah, no, but in your discussion, I was wondering whether you were doing the terms and conditions, then stopping and then talking, because we haven't talked at all about the variances yet. So I wasn't sure how.
We have a little bit, we did a little bit discuss the distance of the property line to,
Okay, so can I comment on that then?
this is your time.
Okay. Well, first of all, I guess one of the problems that we had when we first saw this, is we saw the fence being constructed and we knew that there were variances that said it shouldn't be in that place. And so, the bylaw, sorry, that said it shouldn't be in that place. The town, in the past has been very careful about how far fences can be to the road and hedges. So I figured the town would complain about that if they wanted to or not. But that because there was a bylaw, I went over to the developer and said, I believe there's a bylaw that says it shouldn't be put there. And I checked the bylaw that night and called him and said, yeah, it's not supposed to be put there, but it still went up. So then I said, okay, well, what's the bylaw for and who's policing the bylaw? So I phoned the PAC and I said, you know, what happens when you see people not meeting the bylaws? And they said, well, if you complain, then we can do something about it. So we complained because if everybody just does things against the bylaws, then what are the bylaws for? And people start not believing in them and just going ahead doing everything. So we wanted to register the point that there is an existing bylaw and people, the developers or whoever, are just going ahead and not looking at those bylaws. So the fence and the variation in the front, the town, that's their road, they can figure out if it's going to be a problem or not. But with me, we use that property occasionally when we have extra company. We put our car there. My cousin has extra company. We put our car there. I think, I'm not positive because I'm not sure of the dimensions of that picture. The driveway part may be for David Hashy's, the property next to us. It's 28 feet over. I don't have a picture with me of the proportions there. I know that I usually have to go over that. There's no cutaway for the driveway. Yes, it is a walkway to the to our wharf, and that's basically what we use it for. And share it with my cousin, but our car isn't there a lot, but when it is, it's hard to get out. It will be hard to get out with the hedge like that, so.
Can I speak?
Yes, absolutely. Just if you wouldn't mind identifying
Okay,
yourself.
I'm Brian Kay, co-owner of the property next to the applicant. And a little history perhaps might help. Sorry. A number of years ago, the house across the road from our property was owned by property across the road. That house burned down. A lot of the detritus from that was actually used as fill to raise that property up a little bit. As a result, if one digs in there, one will find pieces of concrete, glass, rebar, and all sorts of other things. It was the property, when we got property through a family transaction, there was a property, or, sorry, a survey marker basically around or somewhere near the telephone pole. Sometime this summer, that survey marker was removed. The person from the Riley family that we talked to this afternoon said they were shown that survey marker. So as a result of the survey marker being removed, we no longer know really where the property line is. So it has probably encouraged us to do a proper survey of our lot. And we would encourage the Riley family to do the same. Perhaps we can hire a surveyor at the same time and save $2 between us. The business about the hedge brought up to deter deer. If nothing else, that's a source of food for the deer. The hedge will grow. It's already pretty close to the fence. It will go through. That's going to encourage the deer, which are already prevalent in town, to wander down the side of our property. And as you know, they are prone to leave, I'm going to put this nicely, offerings to the lawn, which means more traffic. We have a problem, right? We have a problem that we're going to go stepping in even more offerings than we do now. The marker that was placed by the developer of the fence, who was told that the fence he was installing was in violation of the bylaw, said he found a piece of rebar. And as I explained, there are probably numerous pieces of rebar in that area or other pieces of metal. So there's no reason for a piece of rebar to be there where they found it as a property marker, when in fact there was a survey marker which somebody removed. We don't know who. We say persons unknown, I guess. But it's highly unlikely that somebody passing by would have the physical strength to remove the survey marker. Because normally those survey markers are quite long. And I doubt that I could pull one up if it's fully down to 2 or 3 feet, 2 feet, whatever. But it's against the law to remove one, I believe, and somebody did. Don't know who, but it's curious. It's curious that the survey marker was removed in the same time frame as the installation of the fence. So the site plan for the fence has a problem. We don't know really where the property line is. So nothing else exists.
Anyone else online?
So, Madam Chair, there is one other person online, so we can open it up to them, but then you also have Mr. Riley that has raised his hand, I assume, to ask.
I'd like to address probably some concerns that Mr. K raised.
Yes, so which would you like to go first with?
Okay, well, I'll allow the response. I don't want to get into a whole back and forth, but it's fair that he respond.
Yep. Mr. Riley, if you want to unmute, you have the floor to PAC.
Thanks, everybody. I appreciate the unmuting. Just a couple of things to Brian's note. We talked a little bit about this the last time. It's our understanding, and there are what we think are three survey markers that run the property down. And I know there was some back and forth at the last meeting, and I'm sure there's some confusion. It is our understanding that the property markers, which are marked with basically those spikes, run there. I think there are three of them. One is tagged in blue that has the proper thing on top that's towards the water. And it's our understanding that those are the three survey markers. There is nobody, our contractor did not touch, it certainly says he did not touch any of that, and I don't believe he has. Those survey markers are there. We take a look at it, back to Dwight's note, is this house is so old, we really want it to be respectful of both the neighbors and where that is. We're not at the 6'6" level of the house. We will keep we will maintain the fence so that it's not dilapidated. Judy points out that it is within there is a variation component in the bylaws, which is exactly why we're here today. It's not black or white. The reason the variances are put in there is very much, as Judy points out, because if it's reasonable and proper to do, which I think in an 1800-year-old house, that is an important one. And then specifically to Brian's note, I actually called the surveyors. It was Murphy Surveys who did this in the, I think, early 2000s. And maybe it got moved, maybe it didn't. We're more than happy to take Brian and Mary up on if we want to do a proper survey. The technology has changed dramatically over the last 15 years. And that obviously may mean we don't even need we may not even need to seek a variance, basically. But our intent here was to keep within our own property, to have a low-lying, what we would call a low-lying fence and hedge that matches what has been approved across almost the entire Water Street. And not to be outliers and not to spend this committee's time, obviously, but I do understand the concerns from the Ks. And if having a proper survey line over time is helpful, good neighbors and all that, we would be happy to continue to find out where that line is. We're going to have to do that anyway, so happy to figure out with them how we do that.
Mr. Riley, I'm just going to mute you again here.
Yep.
So I'll go to the one other person online. For those that are online, if you have a question or comment regarding this file, please raise your hand. If you one last call, if you have any questions or comments regarding this file, please raise your hand. Floor is yours, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you very much. So it's over to the committee for discussion, and there are some recommended motions as well.
Good question.
Yes.
For Brian, and I know the answer, but I'm gonna ask that they get up and say it. What is your stand on the fence being within a half of foot of your property line?
On the side.
On the side, yes, on the side yard, stay on the side yard.
Sorry.
How much? Is it 1 foot?
1 foot from the side
1
yard.
foot.
Sorry.
It's Brian K again. If you look at where the fence is and the stake that we think the developer of the fence drove in the ground, it is not a foot away, it's less than a foot away from the property line. If we take that stake as being the property line. But, sorry.
My question is, are you opposed or more approved of it being within 1 foot of your property line on the side yard?
within 1 foot, we are opposed.
That was the question.
Sorry. It's just, it's up at the corner or a post. Okay, it doesn't necessarily have to be the whole fence. But, and because the back of the fence is already in a full meter. It's from the water, it comes up the meter and then it comes around and out close to the property line and then back out. So if the top part where the visibility is were, since if you're gonna okay the variance for the front line, then we would like the fence to be not so close to the property line for the first area back to where the house starts, sort of. I mean, the house is there, so we can't see past that anyway. So it's only that front yard. The rest doesn't really matter. It's only that top corner.
Okay.
So one more
You
thing.
really need to, yeah.
One more point. The site plan, I don't think shows the fact that the fence isn't straight. It comes up from the water and cuts toward our property line. If they had just taken the fence straight up, so that little jog wouldn't be a problem.
That's inconsistent with this property line issues. So we're discussing this among the committee right now. That's the stage we're at. I agree.
My opinion is the variance should not be allowed or should not be granted. You know, there's talk about bringing these things into compliance after they're done, but we're not bringing them into compliance. I feel they're bringing us into compliance. As the case have said, and I agree, we have bylaws, we have zoning setbacks for a reason. And if they're not adhered to, applying for a variance is not really bringing it into compliance. An adjacent property owner has already, you know, expressed concerns about visibility and other concerns. So that's my opinion. Is I don't think we should grant this variance for the front or the side. Exactly. Yeah, after the fact. After the fact or after it's been done.
It's recommended motions. The variances, I think that you're asking about, yeah, the variances are the first one, so.
They should still send them. Okay, in case they move it.
Okay. So clarification for you, Madam Chair, when you're looking at the variances and you're also looking at the terms and conditions, speaking with the planner here, if you, regardless of what you do with the variances, you should still look at setting terms and conditions for the fence. Because going forward, if the fence were to be taken down, reapplied in, at least terms and conditions are already established for the fence. So even if you look at rejecting the variances, you should still establish terms and conditions for the fence itself. Because terms and conditions can't be
So the
rejected.
second, so we still want to go through the second motion here that.
You still want to go through both motions because you've got a side yard fence and a front
Right.
yard fence.
Yeah, yeah.
But in the event you do, like maybe Xander can explain.
Yeah,
a
so
little
the terms and conditions are just for the height of the fence. They don't relate to where the fence is on the property. So again, if let's say, you know, you do reject the variances and the fence gets moved in a meter and they want it at that height, at least those terms and conditions are there. Now you obviously can deal with them separately and set whatever terms and conditions you feel are appropriate, but I don't think it makes, they're on the table and they're not related to the placement of the fence on the property. It's only the height of the fence.
Thanks for that clarification.
For clarification, what's the current bylaw state for the height of a fence in a front yard?
3.3 feet.
Okay.
Over 3.3 feet requires terms and conditions.
All right. So, in my opinion, if we're not gonna grant a variance, would the terms and conditions not be to follow the established bylaws that we have?
The established bylaws say that PAC has to set terms and conditions for fences over 3.3 feet. It's not something you cannot do. That's the direction the bylaw gives.
With the terms and conditions, we're not approving or rejecting, we're just simply setting the parameters, setting the conditions under which a fence could be built in a different location.
All right. Right, but
I don't understand if they move it back 1 meter from the line, they can build it to the 3.3 feet
Without coming,
Yes.
with no issues.
Yes.
Right.
but anything above that. Would require terms and conditions, yeah.
Or that just needs clarification. So I just don't understand why we would set terms and conditions. Because that assumes that they still want to build a fence above the 3.3 feet.
The bylaw allows them to do it. It just requires you to set terms and conditions. So you can set terms and conditions. You could say the terms and conditions are the fence can only be 3.4 feet. Or even it's not something you can reject. It's just not. You have to set conditions that either can or cannot be met.
So through you, Madam Chair, so let's say you rejected 0.5 feet from the property line. That would still allow them to move it 1 meter back.
Right.
And could be up to the 5.2 feet based on terms and conditions established. Otherwise, standard is 3.3 feet to meet the zoning bylaw. As Mr. Gopin has noted, because terms and conditions are being provided to you regardless of what the variances are, you can't reject terms and conditions. That's the problem.
so we can say terms and conditions to.
Just the height of the
zoning
fence.
bylaw.
Again, the zoning bylaw says terms and conditions are applied for fences over 3.3 feet. That is what the zoning bylaw says. So the zoning bylaw doesn't say you can only have a fence of 3.3 feet. It says if you want a fence above 3.3 feet, you have to come to PAC for terms and conditions. Which, and we'll talk about that later. It's not a good way to do things. We're gonna fix it,
Yeah.
but this is where we are right now.
All right.
So if I could also state too, like it would be the 5.2 feet or 5.2 feet high. The terms and conditions are only based on that. So if the variances aren't approved, then the fence would have to be moved. But the terms and conditions are still there for a fence at 5.2 feet.
Madam Chair, I'll note Mr. Riley does have his hand raised if you want other clarification. But it's up to you. You're in discussion as PAC. You're in discussion as PAC, so
Yeah,
you would have to decide if you want that or not.
I don't really want to muddy the waters any further.
Fair enough.
Sorry.
Nope.
I'll give you another option, if I may speak. So because there is a potential amendment to the bylaw, which would mean the terms and conditions would no longer come to PAC. You could table it because there is a bylaw amendment in process. Now, if that doesn't go through, then you're going to have to deal with it. Or it's possible because of the variance is being rejected, then the applicant might decide to withdraw the terms and conditions. It's important to have a reason for tabling, but I think you could say we're going to table this, and because there will be a bylaw amendment that will deal with it, and it will set clear terms and conditions for a fence if it's going to be over 3.3 feet, and it wouldn't be coming to PAC anyways.
But Xander, my question is, in the new bylaw, it's still 0.5 feet from the front line and 1 foot from the sideline.
Yeah, so if you
That
reject,
still comes back to
Yeah.
PAC.
if they want a variance for a setback, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
But otherwise, they could have. Once the new bylaw goes through, they could do 5.2 feet.
If they meet the
1 meter
standards
from
of the bylaw,
and
which
the side.
we'll talk about, you'll get to give views on, but they would
Okay.
require a certain amount of transparency.
So, we could, uh, reject or approve the variance and then table the terms and conditions.
Yes, I would table it because there is a bylaw amendment in process that deals with this specific issue.
Yeah. Anyways, that the planning advisory committee of the town of St. Andrews denies the variance to allow for a fence to be located 0.5 feet from the front property line and 1 foot from the side property line of property in the SR zone of the town of St. Andrews for PID 01318112 9 Water Street from Michael Ryder.
Councillor Harden, thank you. Any further discussion? Mr. Ingles, did you have anything? I don't want to exclude you. Did you have anything to add to the discussion?
Myself,
We have
once
a-
again, I find this to be a little bit tricky. In my mind, granting a variance is for, sometimes we do that when there's a situation that's not quite in compliance, and you grant a variance because of, a setback that's not quite there, or to rectify something that is kind of abnormal. And this is a little bit of abnormality because there's not a large setback at the front. I also understand the fence is being put up because they want to keep deer out of the property. So that's another issue that the whole town has. In my mind, I would say put up plant material, and I understand they want to have plant material to buffer a bit of the front of the house from the road and traffic and et cetera. I understand that. In my mind, I would say put some plant material at the front that doesn't require fencing. Put your fencing at the side of the property so you close off your house. Therefore you don't need to have a fence really in the front property, in the front yard at all. If they could do something like that and have different plant material that maybe is not going to get quite as high as the 5 feet they would like to have, but it still creates a buffer, that could be a solution they could go forward with. And if it was set back not at the 0.5 feet from the property line, but once again, it's a tight space at the front. And that's why they're seeking this variance, because there is tight setbacks from the property line to the building front. So I don't know, like in one case, one hand, I think, no, I don't like this. I like to reject it. But on the other hand, I say this is when the variance is called for because of the situation of the tightness of the property line in the house. So I'm really on the fence about this. I think it's tricky. I would like to see going forward what town has proposed for this change for the bylaw of the fence. I've been calling for this for quite a while. My concern is that we're not going to have, sounds from Mr. Gopin that we're not going to have a comment going forward about the fencing, about any fences coming through. And that concerns me even more because I'm sorry, a lot of the fences that I see coming through are not that great. And my concern is we're just gonna have black chain link fence all through the town, front, back, everywhere. It's not gonna be really nice.
The other issue I have with the variance application is once again, we are being asked to approve variance application after the fact. There is an expectation that property owners and developers are fully aware of the bylaws in which they own property or are developing property in whatever community. And I know we've had similar files to this where there have been very similar issues and we have denied variances as a result of that. So I guess from my perspective, that's why I support this motion.
Thanks, Councillor Martin. Anyone else on the side of the table? If there's no further discussion, I'm going to call the question on this motion. All those in favor of the Planning Advisory Committee denying the variance to allow a fence to be located 0.5 feet from the front property line, 1 foot from the side property line of this property on PID 013181112. Please signify by saying aye. Hands up. Those variance requests. Wait,
Mr. Ingles voted yes.
thank you. All right, so those variances are denied and we move them to the terms and conditions.
I'll make a motion that we table the terms and conditions as per Dwight's recommendation that council and PAC are looking at redoing the bylaws under the zoning bylaw for this specific item.
All right, is there a seconder for that motion to table? Thank you, Mr. Tanner. Any further discussion on that? If not, I'll call the question. All those in favor of tabling the terms and conditions on this on PID 013181112, please signify by saying aye.
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 Hands up. That motion is also carried. Thank you very much. Alright, so this point, we're going to move to PCD 250102. This is looking for our views on a text amendment or amendment to Z 2211 to the zoning bylaws Z 2201. And this will, will flow right nicely to our last discussion. So,
Yeah.
Mr. Goldberg, do you want to take us through the planning report slide?
Okay, so I know this is something that we've been dealing with for a long time, and I may have been overly hopeful that the kind of big zoning bylaw update would happen sooner. And this is just causing everybody way too much grief. So it needed to be dealt with. And council seemed like they understood the issue and wanted it to be dealt with as well. So we put together an amendment. There's a few different things it does. They all relate to fences. The one thing it does, which is I think important, is it makes it explicit that all new fences require development permits. It's a bit of a gray area right now. Right now, structures under 100 square feet don't require development permits. They still have to meet the bylaw. We're going to look at kind of the whole accessory structure thing and that a little bit more closely, but specifically fences, we've said all fences require development permits. So they have to go through our office. We have to review them. There's no more gray area there. The second thing it does is it deals with really this issue we've been talking about tonight. What happens when you have a fence over 3.3 feet? Right now, the bylaw requires all fences in front and flankage yards for residential use zones, not uses. That's also a thing we're fixing. Have to come to PAC for terms and conditions. We've had a lot of these. They are these are not something that municipalities are generally dealing with. This is something that got kind of workshop with previous council into the bylaw and has been, I think, a thorn in many people's sides for a long time. I think we can get into some discussion of what the standard should be, but that everything is coming to PAC for standards that are generally always the same. That shows you really are wasting time, staff time, PAC time, and sometimes you'll have very serious files. Typically, I do not consider fences to be serious generally, but you'll have very important files with lots of legal liabilities that could be coming with them, and you don't want to have to deal with 5 fence permits before you get to those. And I'd say even in fact, the majority of the permits that you're dealing with are these types of fence terms and conditions, which you can't really even turn down. So terms and conditions, PAC terms and conditions, not just for fences, but we're trying to find ways to just put standards in bylaws so that PAC is dealing really with variances. And that's when neighbors are getting involved. And we're hearing from the public, which is one of the reasons why variances are important, that the process is important. They're allowed, but there's a process that they can be turned down. But everybody has the right to apply for them. So it's a little bit different from terms and conditions. So that's still going to come to you. So those, the side yard variances, front yard variances. There's a few cases. The third thing we're doing in the bylaw, if neighbors have agreements, right now we require a variance. It's a development officer variance, so you're not seeing these, but it's still $250 that people are paying. And all we're doing is making sure there's a letter. So we can front load that in the bylaw, make sure there's a letter, and with that development permit, that gets dealt with. So we are saving people some red tape there. And only in cases where neighbors are not in agreement would that file come to PAC. And then that's a very important process, which we've gone through a few times. So those are still going to come. Doesn't mean you totally get out of fences. Now, in terms of the standards, we've tried to look at best practices from other jurisdictions and generally what have been PAC's decisions. And so there's 2 different scenarios, and these are only for front and flankage yard fences. We're not dealing with side yards or rear yards here, just like the current bylaw. So for residential uses, regardless of zone, in the mixed use zone, it's a commercial zone in the current bylaw. You have uses that are purely residential. So there's some of those, I think, on Pagan Street. And we'll fix a lot of this stuff. There's other issues with that zone in the kind of bigger picture thing, but specifically, it's very confusing for people who think that they're in a residential zone, but then actually they're in a commercial zone, and so their neighbor's fence doesn't have to come here for terms and conditions, whereas if it was in a residential zone, it would. So we're basically saying if it's a residential use in the town plat, front and flankage yard fences over 3.3 feet in height, we're still limiting it to 6.6 feet. Have to be constructed to have at least 50% transparency. So a chain link fence would be totally fine. This kind of woven wire, totally fine. You get into, a wrought iron, that would be totally fine. Maybe for some, you've got wood space. We need a site plan so we can actually measure that transparency. Maybe you have some variances on that. But I think, most of the fences, that you're seeing, it's the high level of transparency, and that's really the purpose of the bylaw. One of the pictures I put in the report is of Johannesburg in South Africa, which I think most people would agree is not a pleasing urban design. You've got these very walled off communities. One of the nice things, and we're trying to balance here in St. Andrews with the deer, but also the ability to see into neighborhoods. It's I think one of the things that people like about St. Andrews and gives it a lot of charm, is that it's not a walled off community. So that's front and flankage yard fences for residential uses in the town plat. So outside of the town plat, fence, that would not be a standard. So, but the other thing to keep in mind, once you get out of the town plat and into the state residential zone, the setbacks are greater anyways. So there's going to be highway setbacks and things like that. So in the historic business district, and this might address some, maybe not all of Dwight's concerns, but we're saying in the historic business district, in line with the secondary municipal plan, front and flankage yard fences, regardless of use, because you have a lot of commercial uses as well in the historic business district, those have to be traditional building materials or adequate facsimiles. So you would not get, there's a few specific exemptions in the zoning bylaw. There are security fences. We're not touching that, but in general, the fences in front and flankage yards in historic business, regardless of height, would have to be those traditional building materials. So you wouldn't see those chain link fences. So I think that covers it. So we've got development permits. You've got town plat, 50% transparency over 3.3 feet. Historic business district, traditional building materials or adequate facsimiles regardless of height, but still limiting to 6.6 feet. Different uses, it varies a little bit. And signed agreements allowing no need for variances.
Very much, Mr. Goldman. Over to the committee. We're just gonna jot down our views. And then I'll send another to the.
One part, Madam Chair. Mr. Ingles, did you have a question or comment? You were raising your hand there.
Yeah, can we, Xander, in regards to agreements between neighbors, would that be put on title of property?
It wouldn't be put on title of property. It would be a signed agreement that we would keep on record. So it would go into the basically our database. It's
so okay. Then what if one of the owners sells the property? Would they become aware of this agreement that they must abide by, or they don't have to?
It's not it's not a bad idea to put it on title.
I mean, I know, if, for example, I bought a property years ago on PEI, and there was a right of way through the property, and it was on title because it had to be happened. I mean, they needed to have access to the field and behind to do harvesting. So, and I had to be aware of that when I bought the property.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, and that's an easy change.
Okay.
Doesn't really change anything
I'm sorry. And then the second question I had is, in the town plat, you said within commercials, within the commercial historic district, you need to have material that is in keeping with the historic nature. You're saying that within the rest of the town plat, you don't?
Yes.
For the front yard?
Yeah.
So, okay, then my question then is, we just went through a heritage bylaw that took a bit of time to respect that heritage feeling of a town within the town plat. We need to start looking at materials that are within the vicinity of the building that enhances the building and continues that feel. And to my mind, having a 3.3 foot high black chain link fence in front of a historic house is not in keeping with the historic nature of the town plan. So I know, once again, we're getting into the design and what somebody likes and what somebody doesn't like, but I think we need to do better than to have that scenario happening. And I know specifically we have one in town that we approved And the reason we had it approved, I think, was completely insane. And if I could go back in time 2 years ago, I would have said no to it. It wouldn't have made a difference because I would have been the only one saying no. But still, I look at that and I think it's not a blight on society, but we could have done better. And I don't think that's necessary. I think black chain link fence is a cheap and easy fix. And I don't like it. I don't think it's enhancing to the town. And frankly, no one's going to put a 3.3 foot high fence in the front yard because it's not going to do anything. Everybody wants to keep the deer. That's why we're putting fences up. That's why we're at this, because of the deer getting into properties. But if we start having black chain link fence in everybody's front yard as well as the backyard, is going to be horrendous. And if we want to sit here to say, no, it's not, and it's not going to make a difference, I think we're being really foolish in trying to preserve a historic downtown plat and do something like this.
So as I write this down, it's your thoughts that natural, or rather, what's historic building materials?
Traditional building materials or adequate facsimile.
Should be extended outside of the town plat?
I think into the town plat, not just
okay.
yeah.
I've got my zone stuff here, yes.
Exactly.
Okay, that helps.
So identical to the historic business.
Right. Anybody else? That's good. They're addressing a lot of work.
Just have a bit of a concern about the, and Dwight touched on it. If the neighbor's in agreement that if in a year or two that house is sold or that property is sold, and then someone comes in and there's, you know, an 8-foot garage fence or something that's been, you know, allowed, and now they inherit it. I guess, you know, you see it when you buy the house, but there might not be a way around that.
Yeah, I think it's there when you buy the house, so you know about it.
Now, I've got a quick question. What if you're a renter? What the question would be, it doesn't matter, it would go to the homeowner, not the renter?
You mean in terms of the agreement?
Yeah,
It would have to be between landowner.
okay.
Yeah.
Can I ask one more? You mentioned at the start that all fences must have a development permit. Most of the fences that we see don't have any permit. They just, we see it after the fact, such as tonight. So what's the town's plan to deal with it after the fact?
So we'll have a discussion about enforcement after this. It doesn't really change enforcement. If like right now, if you put up a fence and it meets the bylaw, you technically haven't violated the Community Planning Act because you're following the bylaw for something that doesn't need a permit under the bylaw. Under the change bylaw, you have now violated the Community Planning Act because you did not get a development permit, which the bylaw says you have to do. I still think you'll have people who build fences and lots of things without permits. I think that's going to be a perpetual problem. But it just makes it easier on our end to say, no, you have to, if somebody asks us to question, we say, just get a permit. It's not, you know, if you meet these things, then you'll be okay. It's get a permit, show us a site plan on paper, goes in the records.
Just want to build on what Dwight was saying. I'm in complete agreement with him around the importance of preserving the look and feel of the town plat. And in order to do that, fences in the front end flankage should be made traditional building materials or similar facsimiles or however we say that.
Yeah.
But I think that, you know, we spent many months looking at a heritage bylaw, which we hoped would provide some preservation of the look and feel, and it's not just the historic the historic business district, it is the town flag, so. And I would like that wording to preserve the look and feel.
Yes, it will absolutely be there. Any other observations to include?
Madam Chair, just noting that there was one observation in regards to permits being put to the land registry on title.
Yes, I have that too.
Okay, just making sure that
Yeah,
was.
I was gonna read them off before the final vote. Thank you, though. So what I have so far is that when we speak of the agreements between landowners regarding those setback agreements, that should be added to the title. And the other one was that extending the requirement for traditional building materials or facsimiles into the town plat in order to preserve the look and feel of the historic. Have I caught anything? If so, I will all. Yeah, for sure. I'll make sure that gets in there too. All right, so all those in favor of.
You need a mover and a seconder.
Excuse me, yes. Well, I was gonna tell them what they're moving. First of all, sorry.
Nope.
I know it's a little stilted. So I've got agreements, yes, extending traditional building materials, and that we're sort of happy to see this amendment.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second there, Mr. Singer? Thank you very much. There's no further discussion. All those in favor of sending this letter to council, please signify by saying aye.
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 All hands up. All right, thank you. I will do that. Our final agenda item
You
tonight.
gave it to me already.
Like it's click.
No, open the road.
Discussion on enforcement and follow-up. And Mr. Gilbert has been prepared a report for us.
And this one I have a presentation for as well.
Thank you. No, I don't want to update now. Thank you.
We'll just restart your computer and
Oh, yeah.
shut
Shut me right down. Ship that. Go to slideshow. From the beginning. And oh, it's all yours.
So we're not going to talk about any specific properties or files. Those are all confidential. That's an important part of enforcement. It's all confidential. People who are making complaints, that information is not given out. The nature of the complaints and generally the details of compliance are not given out. It's something that is determined by people who have the authority to do so. I do have a kind of flow chart at the end that shows how these things can go. But I think that's generally what the questions have been about, but I do just want to kind of go over some of the basics again about roles and what PAC's role is and what development officers and council are doing as well. So development officers, people like myself, Alex, Judy, we have the authority to interpret zoning bylaws, determine if somebody has violated a zoning bylaw, and decide if development permits are needed. We cannot go on a property unless we have the consent through writing, typically through an application or warrant. We're a little bit different from building inspectors. Building inspectors have more power because generally what they're dealing with are life safety things, and development officers, thankfully, we're not dealing with that. So the enforcement process begins really when a development officer determines that there is a violation. I'll sort of, in the flow chart, you'll see how that can start. But until one of us has basically said, we've looked at the zoning bylaw and said, yes, we have enough information to determine that this is not meeting the bylaw, we begin the enforcement process. PAC, you're not directly involved in the enforcement. You can reject applications, as you did tonight, based on valid planning reasons, which are not keeping with the intent of bylaws and not overall being desirable or in the public interest. And you can also set terms and conditions that ultimately may lead to enforcement or need to be enforced. So that's actually a really important role for PAC when you think about the enforcement process is the terms and conditions that you're setting. Are they going to be easy to enforce? Are there clear standards, ideally quantitative standards? A distance, a 2-meter buffer. That's an easy thing to measure, to show on a site plan. We can go on a property and measure it. Very easy. If you have some general condition about causing a nuisance, that's a little bit subjective. It's going to get a lot harder to enforce. Noise can be difficult. And obviously when we give you recommendations, we're keeping these things in mind, but that's a very important role that you play. Just because it comes up, it is important to really try and have your blinders on when you're thinking about files. Now, compliance doesn't mean you let it happen. Compliance means it's going through the process. And rejection is a perfectly valid part of a process, as long as it has those valid reasons that are based on the Community Planning Act's list of reasons. Somebody building without a permit is not a valid reason to reject. There's still an enforcement process. You can reject it for other reasons, but if for some reason a file was to get appealed and that was seen as a reason that PAC gave for turning something down, I think it's very likely that would be overturned. I can't say for sure, but my advice is you start the file with the report, and every once in a while we will include information about history of a property and how things have happened, and it can be important to understand fully. But I know there's this instinct of, and when I think I show you the flowchart, you'll hopefully understand why these things get so complicated and it takes so long, and why you might think that something is supposed to have come down and it's still up. Council, they get involved generally when things get really serious, and we're dealing with usually actions that are going to lead to removal and possible liens and court actions, fines. PAC, you do not want to be involved in these things. Councillor Harland, you get to be, but the rest of you don't have to be, and that's good. So the process, we've confirmed a violation. If it's an ongoing thing, like if they're building something, they will get an order to cease. If that doesn't comply, then more things can happen. There's further things that can happen as well. So the cessation of development, that's kind of a given. But then you can get to requiring alterations to remove violations and mandating the restoration of land and structures to the previous condition, and even charging the work back to the property through taxes and liens. But B and C are kind of they're more nuclear options. So those are going to be decisions that council generally is making. Even staff generally would not make those decisions. A lot of violations are unintentional, and applicants want to come into compliance and start following the process and make that application, get their permit moving, come to PAC, hopefully get approved, maybe not. It is always advisable to get all your approvals. Call us, ask what you need. I'm so happy when people call me before they start projects, because it's always more complicated if we're dealing with things after the fact. So here's a little flow chart of just a random kind of here's how it could go, and you're going to see all of the not only decision points, but they're things that have to happen, which can drag a process on. So we've got that potential violation flag. Someone has to go and do an initial kind of review, but we can't go on the property. So we're doing this from the street. Maybe we're able to use a drone, but we're not going to measure anything. And we need to communicate because, we give people the benefit of the doubt. We hope that things are unintentional and people would just want to fix things on their own. So we have that initial communication. Hopefully we get voluntary removal, or, we're coming into the process. Let's say that doesn't happen. Okay, then we need to escalate a little bit. So we start some written notices of violations, saying things like, this is on your property. It is a violation of this part of the bylaw, which is therefore a violation of the Community Planning Act. You need to apply for a permit and or a variance or whatever it is. Because again, we can't really determine much until we have that permit application. Maybe that gets through them, voluntary removal. Or maybe they're like, we're going to try our luck, we're going to come to PAC. Maybe you approve it. You don't have to. Again, compliance means compliance with the process, not compliance with history or what people want because they've already done something. It just means the process. Through that process, you can approve, and then great, that whatever it is can be there, but you reject it. And I'm highlighting the PAC role here. So, okay, then there's really no more relief at this point. The structure has to be removed. So we're escalating the language in these orders. We send it by registered mail. That's laid out in the Community Planning Act. Building inspectors and building code violations, slightly different. I'm not going to get into that. I'm not a building inspector. We have to send it by registered mail to the address, or we can serve it to a person. So we send it by registered mail. Doesn't get picked up. 14 days later, the letter comes back to us. Or maybe they get it and they remove it voluntarily. But okay, so then it comes back to us. All right. 4 days after that notice is sent, the order is in effect. We actually don't need to know that the person has received the order to enforce the order. But if you have any other way to contact that person from just like that, what if there's an appeal? What if I'm in front of a judge? You should probably use that other way to contact them. So we're sending emails, making phone calls. We're going to leave a notice on the property. We're trying to get in touch any way we can before we're going to those very serious legal steps, where we're basically going to council in closed session, and council will make that decision whether it is a priority of council to go through this process, because it's a complicated legal process. The fines are not particularly conducive to, they would be a cost of doing business for a lot of developers. It may be worth it to remove a structure and get the property back. But if you're doing a lot of these, you're actually gonna run out of budget to do this, because you can charge it back, but you have to pay up front. And by you, I mean council. So it's a serious decision. And this is very rare that we're actually getting all the way down here. I think in my time with council, it's happened once or twice. It happens in other communities as well. Obviously, this is under Community Planning Act. But we send that final order. Maybe there's the final order is like, your structure is coming down. There will be a bulldozer on your property on this day. You will be charged for it. Maybe you're like, okay. You're not bluffing. We'll do it. But if not, then it's demolition at the owner's expense. So it's enforcement. It's awful. I do not like doing it, because if you're getting past, the top of that step, the top of that list there, you're not dealing with people who want to follow the process. And so they're going to fight you every step of the way. And you might get to the end, and then council's going to be like, you know what? We're really not concerned with this. And I'm not saying that St. Andrews Council has done this, but it's happened in other communities. And so it's a little bit analogous to some of the enforcement processes in the justice system, where you've got, the police are doing one thing, and you've got judges over here. And we're not going to talk about the justice system, but I think everybody is fairly aware now that we have police who keep on bringing the same people back, but the police can't actually do anything about that because that's not their role. Maybe they can advocate for some legislative changes. So there's, it might take a long time to actually, if you're driving around and you're like, we rejected this, why is it still up? It might take a long time. But eventually it will happen. But it takes a lot of work. And again, I'm not gonna name any specifics, or even say that this is in St. Andrews, because I work in multiple communities. But I have been chasing people for 3 weeks trying to get something done, and that was, far down in that process. So hopefully that helps explain a little bit what's going on behind the scenes of enforcement, because there's a lot. We can't talk about it. We can't talk about the specifics. So if you call us up and you're like, what's happening with that thing? I'd be like, I can't tell you. I might be able to say there's an enforcement in action. Or if there's a violation, there is an enforcement will occur. Every time somebody asks about a property, whether it's PAC, as members of the public, you can obviously alert us to things that you may think are violations. You obviously have good knowledge of the bylaws. So that is typically how we do find out about violations. Sometimes it's through staff. We do come to town, we do drive around, building inspectors do that. But a fence going up is generally not something a building inspector is going to notice, because they're looking for those bigger structures that are going to involve building code.
Yes, it's question.
Thank you, Sandra. That's really helpful.
It
And
is.
I wonder, are we able to have copies of the slides?
Mhm. Yeah, I've got it. I'll send it in.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. So I didn't know that development officers could order cessation of a work order. I thought it was only building inspectors.
It depends on the type of violation. So if somebody's violated building code, no, we can't get involved in that. But if somebody has done something that is not in conformity with the zoning bylaw,
right?
Yes, we can and do send orders. And usually that takes care of it. That's that first step, that initial communication. That's it. People usually are doing it unintentionally and want to follow rules.
Mr. Ingles, any questions, comments on Mr. Zan?
No, I think this is great, Sandra. It's good information, and it's nice to know more about our rule is, and I think it also, to your point, when you said it takes a lot of time for these actions to come to fruition, it gives, whether it's people on our committee or people in the town, peace of mind that yes, things are being looked into, but it's not going to be a quick fix right now.
Do you think this would be valuable for council to understand this process as well?
Yeah.
Like I'm the only councillor who would be a bit surprised.
I will say one more thing. Enforcement, as much as it's annoying and will always be something that has to happen, it must happen. It is so important that rules are enforced. Because it's absolutely true. If you don't enforce them, and that doesn't mean, unleashing wrath on everybody who breaks the rules, but making sure that rule of law gets they're funneled into that process. You have to do that. That's such an important part of all of our jobs.
Any comments from Casey? As we go through our agenda? No other comments? We have no closed items. Okay, so here we are at 8:47. Meeting is adjourned.